the body is going to do everything it can to provide the brain with glucose. Now, that doesn't mean that we are doing a constant feeding of glucose. How many of y'all have breakfast? It is the most important meal of the day, and I will continue to say that throughout the rest of my class. All right, so how many of y'all had lunch? Okay, how many of y'all plan to maybe eat when you leave class? Oh my goodness, I plan to. I have my breakfast, I have my lunch, I'm having my dinner. Okay? I mean, no, y'all can look at me and tell I like my food. Now, here's the thing. When we eat in this fashion, we do have huge gaps of time. You think about, okay, well, I had breakfast at 7. I did lunch at 1. I'm going to do dinner at 6. And then, oh man, bada bing, bada boom, I'm not going to have breakfast until tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock again. I've got from 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock to go. This is telling me that the body is going to have to make sugars in a different way. And it will. Because the one thing the body will do everything it can to get the glucoses to feed the brain. For the most part, our sugars come to us from plants. Lactose is the sugar that comes to us from dairy, usually in the form of milk. Monosaccharides, the one carbon ring. This is my glucose, fructose, galactose. My disaccharides, 2 carbon rings together. The sucrose, that we know as table sugar. Maltose, lactose. The polysaccharides, which are going to be these long chains of the carbon rings together, basically glucose after glucose after glucose after glucose. Now, these are our starches. And then it makes up plant cell walls, which is cellulose. Now, we as humans, we're either going to eat the plant directly, or we're going to eat something that ate a plant, all right? But for us, cellulose is simply fiber for us, okay? Now, this one right here, glycogen. Ever heard of it?
In the joints help the movement.
And what are we doing with it? What have we done? We have taken the glucose molecule, just kind of change the shape just a little bit for it to become glycogen. And after we eat, the glucose that's not completely used, okay, gets changed into glycogen. And it gets stored in muscles and the liver for short-term storage. What could be short-term storage? A lot of people will do this, like if they're heavy into exercise, they'll eat the starchy foods, okay, and it's stored as energy for that exercise that they'll do. Short-term storage is telling me this could be from breakfast to lunch, from lunch to dinner, from dinner till breakfast the next morning. If it doesn't get used up within a certain amount of time, the body will convert it into the fat, which will be stored in the fat cells. So, sugars, the one thing that we have to do, we have to take the sugars that we eat and make sure every single one of them gets into the form of a glucose molecule. And we either use it directly or we store it, either short term or long term. Glucose is the only sugar used by the body. Glucose is how the cell itself will make ATP. It will not use sucrose, lactose, maltose, galactose. Even though we may consume it in those forms, the body has got to break it down into a component glucose, either use it or store it. Does that make sense? All right. As the sugars are going to be given to the body, well, we're going to see that the liver and the muscle, okay, you're going to come across this again. It's going to be in the liver and the muscle that this glucose molecule that's been sort of rearranged just a little bit, okay, where it's going to be stored. The body will want to have that storage to be a quick source of the glucose. Now, when the storage for the glycogen is full, we are going to convert it to the fat cells. Now, note that sugars, we don't only need sugars for that glucose that's going to be used for ATP. There are other parts in our cells that are sugars where you're going to find sugars. For example, DNA. DNA, the sugar, deoxyribose. RNA, ribose. All right? So we've got these parts of the body that are going to be sugar-based. They're going to have some form of sugar in them. And the body will take materials that we give it and turn it into the sugar that is needed. Now, the other source, like I've said before, the second one that your body wants to use as a source of energy are the lipids, the fats. We consume fats in the form of a triglyceride. That tells me that I have a molecule that is going to have a head and then 3 fatty tails. That's 1, 2, 3 means my triglyceride. We consume them as either saturated or unsaturated. Saturated would be when we eat stuff like the fat that comes with meat. In other words, if you don't do really lean meat, whole milk, cheese, eggs. They're solids. At room temperature, these are going to be the foodstuffs that are a solid. The ones that are unsaturated are a liquid at room temperature. Now, we tend to think when we hear something, triglycerides, cholesterol, we tend to think, uh-oh, bad. Why?
Because of plaque.
Because wait.
In the arteries?
In my arteries. Yes. When that becomes a problem, it leads to the heart disease. Okay? And our body has a special way to take the fats that we give it, the fats, the cholesterol, this sort of thing. Now, with cholesterol, okay, note, it is not found in plants, but lipids can be, because you can have something like sunflower oil. Well, a sunflower is plant, okay? So the triglycerides can be not only just in meat, dairy, but in plants also. Cholesterol tends to be meat and dairy, with none of it being found in plants, okay? Now, here's the thing. Under normal conditions, okay, under normal conditions, yes, we need the fats. But now, wait a minute. What happens with fat and water?
They don't mix.
They don't mix. So, let me think here for a second. I have to take it in my diet, because it's a food stuff that I've got to have, but I'm taking it, I'm putting it into a water environment. How do I expect it to get digested? How does the body break down the fats that we give it? From where?
Break it down in the intestine.
The what?
Break it down in the intestine instead of the stomach.
But we've got to have something called an emulsifier. Ever heard of that? What is it?
That breaks down fats.
Breaks down fats. It's soap. Where does that come from in my body? Where does an emulsifier, which is going to act like the properties of soap, come from in my body? Comes from my gallbladder. All right? So the gallbladder will secrete its materials as the food is passing through, and it will help to break down the fats. It breaks down the fats from going from the 3 fatty acid tail to 1. And you get a whole bunch of them together, all right? And with these fatty acid tails, they get formed, they'll get wrapped, all right? They'll get transported in the bloodstream, they'll go to cells, and cells are going to convert them to something that looks like this. Which is what? A phospholipid, which is going to make up all the membranes that I need. Under normal conditions, meaning your body is healthy, the body's utilizing the materials, this is okay. However, there can be certain things where this becomes an issue. Maybe your diet's bad. You begin to see the stuff build up in the arteries known as plaque, okay? But sometimes people have genetic defects where when the body wraps those component parts of the fatty acids, where it wraps it, it takes it to a cell, the cell has no receptor to receive it. And it builds up in the blood. People can have such severe conditions that when they have to go have blood drawn, their blood is actually milky due to